Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be here today. Today, we're going to explore a lot of things about Hanukkah, what it is really about, what about presents and gifts. Isn't it just the Jewish Christmas? Was it always this big of a deal? Is Hanukkah in America different from in Israel? And things like that. And we're also going to include a lot of facts you might not know, even if you think you do, even if you grew up Jewish and went to Hebrew school, or even if you've heard the basic Hanukkah story a million times. My goal today is that everybody learns at least one new thing you didn't know about Hanukkah. Have I piqued your curiosity yet? We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. Before we get into the commonly told story of Hanukkah, we need to bring to mind a very critical framework as our background as we explore Hanukkah as it has come to be celebrated in America today. This framework undergirds everything that is Jewish in America. So it's very important to state, even if it seems completely obvious, or even if you think it's no longer relevant and Jews are free in this country, so just need to get over the whole Jews are a minority thing. Here's the important framework. Jews have always had to figure out how to live between a rock and a hard place. The rock of hatred, anti Semitism, and annihilation, and the hard place of total assimilation and the complete loss of Jewish identity and expression. Not just now, but across all time and around the globe, the question for Jews has always been how to adapt to our surroundings so that we aren't a target for annihilation, and how to retain our Jewish values and identity without going too far. While Jews have always been a tiny minority, for some reason, we have too often been feared, ridiculed, targeted, persecuted, and worse. So, undergirding our decisions as American Jews is the fact that we live under this constant tension and even ambivalence of how do we maintain our identity and our voice in a foreign land whose majority people are not Jews and whose customs and religious celebrations not only exclude us, but also overwhelm us and drown out our voices entirely. We're forced to endure Christmas everywhere, while we do not force non Jews to endure our holidays. I'm sure many of you here this morning can resonate with this tension, even if you're not Jewish, because few Unitarian Universalists are in the majority culture when it comes to religion and independent thinking. From that perspective, I think you all can resonate with just a bit of this tension. Maybe not quite to the same extent as being Jewish in a world which has largely hated Jews, but still you can resonate with it. And if you think this no longer applies in this country where Jews have been fully accepted and we need to just shut up about this whole thing, may I remind you of the Tree of Life massacre not too long ago. In fact, that event had a profound impact on me in particular, as I was afraid after that incident to ever do anything public as a rabbi in the St. Charles area, which is very conservative and very non Jewish. So, yes, this tension of being a minority drowning in a Christian majority does still apply. On the Jewish calendar, no holiday speaks to this juggling of tension and identity more than Hanukkah. With that in mind, let's look at how and why Hanukkah came to be. So, the customary story behind Hanukkah goes like this, and if you've heard it before, this is going to be familiar. Many years ago, the land where Jews lived, which is now called Israel, came under the control of the Greeks. The Greeks brought with them reforms which included secular education, culture, theater, gymnasiums, art, and literature, all very good things. But their reforms also included seizing control of the Jewish temple, the center of Jewish life, not just religiously, not just something they attended every now and then, like maybe some people do with church, but the Jewish temple was the very center of all Jewish life. Furthermore, these reforming Greeks allowed non Jews to do all kinds of things in the Jewish temple. The Jews could no longer practice their religion in their own temple, but the Greeks could do anything they wanted in the Jewish temple. Unfortunately, they had no respect for anything Jewish and did things like sacrificing pigs on the altar. You can imagine how well that went over with the Jews. Despite that, most of the Jews liked most of the Greek reforms. That constant tension between annihilation and assimilation was a huge factor going on at that time. The Jewish land and the Jewish people had been taken over by the Greeks. The Jews were given the demand to assimilate and stop acting like Jews. After some time under this Greek rule, a tiny group of Jews were uncomfortable with everything the Greek reforms brought, not just squelching the use of the temple and the Jewish religion. This tiny group was led by Judas, whose nickname was Maccabee, and Maccabee in Hebrew simply means the hammer. I guess we could call Judas the MC Hammer of his day, who was trying to say to the Greeks that when it came to the Jewish temple, well, you can't touch this. I hope some of you will get that reference. As the story goes, despite all odds, this tiny little band led by the hammer won back their temple. And of course, the story claims that they won because they were aided by the miraculous help of God. Because the temple had been so terribly defiled by the Greeks, it had to be cleaned up and prepared for rededication. The story says that during their cleanup, they found a tiny bit of oil which was pure enough to be used for the lamp, but it was only enough for a single day, and they needed 8 days to purify more oil. The rabbis later tell us that the tiny bit of oil burned for 8 days while more oil was being purified. They called that another miracle. And the holiday of Hanukkah came about as a way to honor that miracle of 1 day's worth of oil burning for 8 days. The dreidel game even reinforces this idea that a great miracle happened in the 1 day of oil burning for 8 days. That's the standard story of Hanukkah in a nutshell, the one everybody's probably heard and is familiar with. Before we go any further, though, we're going to do something I consider really fun. You're probably going to disagree with me on that fun factor, but we're going for it anyway. That means it's time for a pop quiz. Here's the pop quiz. What you do is just select each statement that you think is true. This is anonymous. No one will know who clicks what, not even Sherry or I. So have fun and click away, and we'll give you a few minutes to do this. If it's true, click the little button.
I'm not sure why, but the 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth answer choice, it should be there is only one correct way to light the menorah. I don't know how menorah dropped off.
It says Hanukkah candles, and that's fine.
Oh, it's not showing up on my screen. Huh.
So has everyone pretty much had time to read through and click, or do we need a few more seconds?
I can't get more than one to click.
Oh, I must not have set it up correctly. Okay.
Well, just make a note in your head how many you clicked.
Okay.
Is everybody else having that problem?
Yeah, I'm sure I must not have set it up to allow for more than one choice. So.
No, there is not a none of the above. But hold that in mind. That's a very good thought.
Okay, looks like clicking has stopped, so I'll go ahead and share the results.
Okay. Now, can you put the poll back up, because I'm going to go through it? Well, you can just leave this up.
Okay.
Okay. So let's go over the statements of the quiz. Statement 1. In the past, globally, Hanukkah has been a very, very minor holiday. It's nowhere to be found in the Hebrew Bible. It's not a holiday which the Torah commands us to observe, because it isn't even in the Jewish Bible at all, not even a hint. So the first statement is false. Statement 2, the only correct way to spell Hanukkah is using Hebrew letters. Otherwise, any spelling attempt at transliteration is technically okay. I personally prefer the way you see here with the CH, because it's been in longer use, and to me it makes more sense and reflects the Hebrew letters more accurately. But lately, Hanukkah that starts with an H and has 2 Ks in it has become more popular. It's also correct. It's more popular. I don't think it's quite as accurate, but basically any attempt at spelling a Hebrew word with English letters can be correct. So that too was a false statement. Nicole, you're giving things away. I'm going through it. Statement 3. What is commonly referred to as a Hanukkah menorah is actually a Hanukkah. It is different from a standard Jewish menorah, the symbol of Judaism, because a Hanukkah has 8 places for the 8 candles, one for each night of Hanukkah, plus one more for the helper candle, which is only used to light the other 8 candles. I don't know if you noticed in the Light One Candle song, they had children lined up with candles, and they had the tallest kid, because the helper candle is called the shamash, and usually that has a higher, it's elevated above the other 8 candles, and he went around lighting each of the other candles one at a time. So they were a human Hanukkah. There is a regular 6-branched menorah, which is the common symbol of Judaism, but it's not the same as the Hanukkah. There's 6 branches and 6 candles, technically 7 because of the one in the middle, as opposed to the 8 plus 1 of Hanukkah. So that statement was also false. Statement 4. The word Hanukkah does not mean festival of lights. The word Hanukkah is Hebrew for dedication, as Nicole told us, because the emphasis was on the rededication of the temple. So that was another false statement. Are you seeing a pattern here? Statement 5. There is no one correct way to light the Hanukkah candles. Having said that, I need to emphasize that there is a traditional way. Insert them left to right, insert them right to left, insert them left to right, do the hokey pokey, say the proper Hebrew blessings in Hebrew. And if you don't follow all those rules of tradition, you haven't done it right. But this is important. As with most traditions, this is all custom. It is not a commandment, and customs can, do, and must change with time. So I'm saying that if you want to light Hanukkah candles, light them, even if you aren't Jewish. If it would bring meaning to your season, do it. If it would inspire you to be the light, do it. You don't even have to wait for next year. Start with tonight. Tonight will be night 4 of Hanukkah, so light 4 candles. The helper candle is optional. Tomorrow night, light 5 candles, and so on until we reach the 8th night and all 8 candles are ablaze. Don't have a Hanukkah? Google how to DIY a Hanukkah without buying one. It can be as simple as lining up 8 tea lights or 8 candles. They don't even have to match. And start with lighting one the first night and then lighting another one each night until the 8th night when they're all lit. Hey, you could even use birthday candles in a Hostess Twinkie. I wouldn't recommend eating the Twinkie with melted candle wax all over it, but hey, whatever floats your boat. The point is, don't let the fear of doing it wrong or not being Jewish or not saying the right blessings or not having an official Hanukkah or the right kind of candles stop you. Any way you want to honor bringing in the light and being the light is good. Now, if you were paying attention about the pop quiz, so far, there were no true statements at all. So do you think statement 6 is true or false? Statement 6 is Chanukah and the Maccabees is a story about progressive Jewish freedom fighters. Sherry, you can close the poll results now.
Okay.
So let's dive deeper. The statement is that Chanukah and the Maccabees is a story about progressive freedom fighters. This is what we've all been told. And in fact, in our opening song, Peter Yarrow wrote and reiterated that notion in the first 4 lines of his song. And I almost didn't use this song because of that, because this too is actually a false statement. So Nicole was right. There were no true statements in the quiz at all. They were all false statements. I kind of tricked you. Yeah. So shoot me. What can I say? Basically, the story we get is that it was good Jews who were freedom fighters going up against bad Greeks, and the good Jewish freedom fighters actually defeated the much larger army of bad Greeks. Even the Peter, Paul, and Mary song holds up the Maccabees as freedom fighters, winning back religious freedom for all Jews and restoring their temple and its rituals. The underdogs, the good Jews win. Yay! Let's light the candles and eat fried things. Woohoo! Yay to freedom fighters! Death to tyrants! But that's not the real story. That might surprise you, but that's not the real story. Here's the thing. Judas and his hammer band did not represent all Jews. In fact, they represented a very, very tiny minority of Jews. They were not freedom fighters. They were ultra right-wing religious zealots, even fighting and killing other Jews, the ones with whom they disagreed. The total agenda of the Maccabees were that they wanted all Jews to be ultra-Orthodox, strictly observant Jews. They were fanatics, not brave freedom fighters. And winning back the temple by this small group was for one purpose: to go back to offering sacrifices and strict Orthodox observance of all the Jewish rules by all Jews. The Maccabees rejected all reforms the Greeks had brought, including theater and education and literature and art. What the Maccabees were fighting for was not freedom of religion for all, but freedom to practice religion only their way. They were Jews telling other Jews how to be proper Jews. And unfortunately, this is a problem in the Jewish community that hasn't gone away yet. For many, if not most of you, this might be the first time you've heard this truth. It's this accurate historical account, which is why Hanukkah can be problematic for a lot of Jews, and it was for me for a lot of years. But now we've got a more accurate history in place about the Greeks and the Maccabees and the progressive Jews who were not Maccabees and therefore targeted and killed by the Maccabees as much as the Maccabees targeted and killed the Greeks. And here I would like to note that I would have been one of the Jews the Maccabees killed had I been there in that day and time. This fact has made Hanukkah a real challenge for me to embrace for several decades. Let's quickly look at that 8 nights of oil story. As you might guess, this was an add-on to the history as an invented story of the miracle of oil that managed to burn for 8 days. Why was it invented and added on, we might ask? This part I think you will find fascinating. Long before the Greeks and the Maccabees, many Jews had been doing a festival of lights every winter around the time of the winter solstice, just as did many other non-Jewish groups of people, in fact, most groups of ancient peoples, from time immemorial. In fact, the Talmud, that I've talked about it before, that really big 42-volume text, which gives Jews every rule imaginable, tells us a very interesting story. It tells us that the first man, Adam, again, story, not truth, saw the world heading into darkness as the days grew shorter and nights grew longer. He was afraid, thinking that the entire world was dying and he along with it. After the longest night was past, which we know as the solstice, he saw that the days began to get longer again and realized this was a natural course of nature's annual cycle and not the end of the world. So Adam decided to set an annual holiday to celebrate the darkness and return of light by lighting fires every night, starting with one fire the first night, adding another fire each night for 8 nights. To the ancients, fire was life-giving, and it helped quell the fear of darkness as well as to call back the return of the light. Sound familiar to other similar celebrations? The point here is that even the Talmud tells us the ancient Jews were lighting solstice fires for centuries before the Maccabees, just as so many other ancient peoples have honored the darkness and the return of light, whether it's been called Yule or solstice or Calendia or Saturnalia or by any other name. The ancient Jews were no different. They had their own festival of lights, which the Talmud traces all the way back to Adam. Naturally, the priests did not want the Jewish people doing what other ancient peoples were doing because, well, those people were pagans and Jews weren't. The priests and later the rabbis did their best to stop the yearly festival of lights, but the people insisted on celebrating anyway. No matter what the Jewish authorities said, the people wouldn't stop the practice. They wanted their winter festival of lights just like other religions were doing. Eventually, the rabbis finally conceded, and in an if you can't fight them, join them kind of a move, they decided that if the people insisted on lighting the fires every winter for their festival of lights in the darkest part of the year, then they could at least make it Jewish. That should also sound familiar when it comes to Christmas traditions. Jewish priests aren't the only ones who wanted to make it look like religious celebrations of all kinds didn't actually have more ancient roots. This has happened time and again through the millennia. Because Hanukkah is not in the Jewish Bible and therefore did not have the biblical backstory all the other Jewish holidays have, they came up with this story of finding the oil during the temple cleanup and its rededication and invented the miracle of 1 day's worth of oil burning for 8 days They added it on to Hanukkah, and so the people could then have their annual 8-night festival of lights, but with a Jewish spin. In addition, they also made the Maccabees look like heroes. And that's how the rabbis justified the winter festival of lights, that they couldn't stop the people from celebrating. And they glorified both the Maccabees and brought in the God aspect of being the provider of miracles to give the whole shebang a religious spin that the rabbis could live with. The people didn't need the religious spin on it, but the rabbis did. So they went along with it because they could still have their festival of lights the way they wanted it. Over time, of course, as with all religious celebrations, as the story was retold with the inaccurate history, people began to believe the inaccurate history. Over time, the real history has been forgotten. Same thing with a lot of other religious practices. So the real heroes of the Hanukkah story are the common people, people like you and I, who would not stop celebrating the winter darkness in ways that were meaningful to them, regardless of what the religious authorities said. So now that we all know about this politicized history and invented stories behind Hanukkah, why and how, and even should we celebrate Hanukkah at all? That's where I've been stuck for a really long time until just recently. And what about all the hullabaloo and the commercialism and the gift giving? Is that just a way of trying to keep up with Christmas? And if so, should we not do it? Clearly, Hanukkah has changed drastically in the past century here in this country. It's not about trying to outdo Christmas. It's about trying to be comfortable as a minority Jew at a time when Christmas overwhelms everything, heightening one's awareness of one's Jewishness more than in any other time of the year. Christmas pervades everything, and I do mean everything, for 2 months. Not just one day, not just 1 week, not just 1 month, but 2 months out of every year. That's 1/6 of every year that's taken up by Christmas this and Christmas that and Christmas the other. It's far too overwhelming to ignore. And some people have tried switching over to the word holiday, but when you look a little deeper, really, it's not holidays, it's Christmas, 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 Christmas. Most of you are so used to it that you probably don't even realize what it's like not to be into Christmas and to be drowned by it for 1/6 of every year. I have a feeling I have a few more people in the not into Christmas category in this group than I have found like anywhere else in my life other than around Jews. Being a tiny minority voice in this country for those 2 months can feel demeaning and diminishing. Believe me. For many American Jews, religious or not, Hanukkah is the time we must assert our identity in a land overrun with tinsel and holly and Christmas songs and Christmas movies everywhere. We can't get away from it. We can't escape it. Hanukkah is a holiday that values light in a season when the days are short. It offers warmth when the nights are cold. It proffers hope when there seems to be only despair. It speaks to minorities who are not part of this Christmas takeover, not just Jewish minorities, but other minorities. These are all feelings and values that speak across the generations. While too much commercialism can turn something special into something crass, commercialization also has the effect of empowering ordinary Jews and ordinary people who want to celebrate their Jewishness in a country which allegedly allows that to happen. So commercialism isn't necessarily a bad thing. As an example, finally seeing gay people on TV shows and in movies made it more real and more acceptable as part of normal life, which finally allowed our equal rights to be passed. I really believe it was media and commercialization which really helped make that happen. So commercialization of Hanukkah also helps to legitimize the Jewish minority engulfed for 2 months every year by the overwhelm of Christmas. The commercialization of Hanukkah is not about keeping up with the Christian Christmas. Rather, it's about preserving a sense of pride in being Jewish. Hanukkah is the epitome of the freedom of expression and the right to choose how I am a Jew in this country. Because here in America, we have that right. It behooves us to raise our voices as Jews that we have as much right to be here and to fully live and express our Jewish selves, as do the Christian majority, even when Christmas swirls around us. While commercialization can be meaningless and emphasize consumerism and give the wrong message, it can also be used as an opportunity to teach real values. Don't most people try to do that with Christmas? Haven't you all tried to do that with your children? Sure, not everyone, but the celebration creates opportunities to connect with one's heritage, family traditions, and values that go beyond the commercial aspects. It's the duty of parents to help communicate those values through the holidays, whether it's Christmas, Hanukkah, Yule, solstice, Kwanzaa, Ramadan, or any combination of those and any other holiday. From its very beginning, Hanukkah in America has been a countercultural movement, taking a strong stand against Christmas being the dominant culture, as well as being against the Orthodox Jews who push the agenda of only one way to be a proper Jew. Why in the world would any progressive Jew not love that and get behind that kind of countercultural movement and have so much delight and joy and fun doing it in the process? Hanukkah activities and events of all kinds, both inside and outside the home, help Jews avoid feeling invisible during the Christmas season. Hanukkah's evolution in the US is a story of immigrants in a new country where they were finally free to be Jewish and Americans. The entire message of Hanukkah is that there's more than one way to be a proper Jew. And isn't that the best message any holiday could send to both children and adults? That is worth acknowledging. That is the true miracle of Hanukkah we should celebrate. But what about giving gifts? Where did that come from if it wasn't already a part of Hanukkah? Isn't that just trying to make Hanukkah into the Jewish Christmas? Not really, and here's why. Gift giving is not unknown to Jews. It's been a long-standing Jewish custom reflecting Jewish values. We see this in several ways throughout our history. We brought gifts to the temple and to its priests as an important part of our ancient Jewish religious practice. It was our gifts which made building the tabernacle in the wilderness possible at all. Purim features gift giving. The Jewish way of commemorating ordinations, bar mitzvahs, births, weddings, and such have always been gift-giving occasions. And you've likely all heard of Hanukkah gelt. Gelt is just a Jewish word for gold coins, or their cheaper chocolate cousins. They were the opportunity to give small amounts of money to Jewish teachers who were otherwise prohibited from accepting money for teaching Torah. So gift giving is not at all antithetical to Jewish values. When adults saw that giving gifts at Hanukkah was a way of creating joy and beautifying and magnifying the happiness in the middle of the dark nights of winter, they jumped on it. It wasn't to make Hanukkah more like Christmas. It was a way to add joy to Hanukkah, and also so Christmas would not feel so overwhelming to the Jewish minority. It was a way we could celebrate our minority status and voice. Let's face it, Hanukkah in America is about being part of a minority culture, living among a huge majority, and being proud of who we are despite that minority status. In conclusion, Hanukkah is the paradigm of the tension Jews have always faced between acculturation and assimilation, and each generation has adapted and reimagined Hanukkah and the Festival of Lights in ways that speak to that generation's needs, regardless of how the rabbis had to put a spin on it. Hanukkah in America is a countercultural movement. It's a time for thinking about what it means to be a free people who also live and participate in the greater society who are not a Jewish majority and whose standard way of celebrating Christmas has become completely overwhelming and exclusive to those who do not celebrate Christmas. In essence, American Jews took back Hanukkah and have made it our own. So yes, I like candles. Next year, I'm looking forward to adding in the practice of giving gifts, as I've not done that part yet. I don't like candles because I believe in an invented story about the miracle of oil. I don't like candles to honor some misguided ultra-Orthodox Jews who killed as many other Jews as they did Greeks. I don't like candles in the hopes of bringing back the temple and its sacrifices. I light the candles because it isn't easy being a minority, not just in the US, but even more so here in St. Charles, especially without being part of a Jewish-centered community for support and camaraderie. I light the candles in honor of Jews whose lives have been taken just because they're Jews. even if it was other Jews doing the killing. I light the candles because winter is hard. Those of us with autoimmune diseases have it rough enough as it is, but in wintertime, some of us are sicker because the colder temps are triggering and the sunlight is less. Even some without autoimmune diseases struggle in the winter more than in the summer. So I light the candles for the hope to get through winter with grace. I light the candles as a way to align myself with those of us who choose to create and celebrate Judaism in ways that are personally meaningful without overly cumbersome rules. I light the candles to stand with those who do not have the opportunity to openly celebrate their religion, whatever it may be and wherever they may live. I light the candles to open a window of light on a dark world. I light the candles because I believe Hanukkah can be for anyone who wants to stand with minority voices, for those who think Christmas was a religious holiday which should have never become a nationally mandated holiday, and as an interfaith expression of commonality. I light the candles as a way to be proudly Jewish and countercultural. However you choose to celebrate these 2 months of the year, from the end of Halloween to the beginning of the new secular year, I hope candlelight will be a part of it, along with a heaping amount of fun and friendship, light and laughter, and joy with a sprinkle of jingle. I hope embracing the light during these dark nights will inspire you to be the light in wonderful, caring, inclusive ways. If you have further questions about Hanukkah, which time did not allow me to cover, feel free to send me an email. Sounds like Nicole could also answer a lot of questions. I'm also happy to answer questions and share some of what I know. I would also be happy to do some classes if there are other topics any of you would like to explore. Again, just send me an email. But I sincerely want to thank you for this opportunity today to talk about Hanukkah and how we can understand why it is such an important part of American Judaism, as well as a countercultural movement pushing back against the majority that overwhelms us for 2 months. Now, go out and be the light shining in the dark.